Hi, this is Bill Raymond, and welcome back to my video series on creating a Docker AI and machine learning image using Visual Studio Code. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Python. Let's get started. Now I'm back in Visual Studio Code. I do not have that container open right now, and I also closed down the Docker dashboard because we're not going to need it for this video. I'm going to show you an easier way to open the container in this video, and this is how I'm going to do it moving forward. So in Visual Studio Code, type Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and then type Open Folder in Container. And when you do that, you'll be able to select that folder right away. So press Return, select the folder that has that Docker file in it, just the folder, and choose Open. Now, instead of opening the folder and then reopening it in the container, it's just going to open it directly in the container. That will speed up our workflow. Now, when you first open this and you get to the Docker file, you might get this dialog window here that says, hey, do you want to install the dev containers extension? You might be thinking, wait a minute, Bill, I installed the dev containers extension. Why is it asking that? We'll cover that in another video. For now, just go ahead and X out of that. I'm going to paste code into this Docker file, small bits at a time so you can follow along. Hopefully you can just sort of read this and type while I'm talking. But of course, you can always go down to the description below and get the code that I'm providing. Okay, so I'm going to paste in my first few lines of code. The first things that you'll notice is with my theme, my dark theme turned on, I have green text there with these pound signs in front of it. You might be wondering what those are. Those are comments. That's just text that I can type to help you understand what it is I'm trying to accomplish. In this case, I'm trying to create what's called an argument. An argument is a variable that Docker will use while it's building an image. And in this case, we're creating a variable called pyver, and we're saying this is the version of Python that we want, 3.11 in my case. Now, again, I'm doing the specific version of Ubuntu 2204, and I'm doing a specific version of Python 3.11.x because I want my video to last a while. And I think that if I keep it with these versions, then you can use my video and later you can upgrade to newer versions if you feel like it. Okay, so this arg_pyver is going to define a version, but right now it's not doing much of anything. The one thing I will point out is later, it will find whatever the latest 3.11 package is, which could be 3.11.2, 3.11.3, or what have you. Make sure that when you type these things, I know that you might be used to writing code, and maybe you like to put a space between the equal sign. Don't do that. Type everything I provide here exactly as I'm typing it, with the capital letters, with the no spaces, with the quotes. If you decide to do something a little different, it may not work and you might encounter an error later. So I'm going to go ahead and create another blank line and paste in the next bit of code. I discovered that while I was installing Python, it would go and start doing the install, and then it would stop and ask me a question. What time zone are you in? And that question that the Python software is asking is not something that Docker is going to want to see. If at any point you install software and Docker sees, oh, there's a question being asked, it'll just stop and it'll provide an error and it's not going to work. So what we want to do is define the time zone for Python so that when it's doing its installation, it doesn't ever have to pause to ask that question. In this case, what we're doing is we're creating an environment variable. That's what that capital ENV stands for. The ENV will get used even after the Docker image is created. So Python can make use of this when it's running the container. So we can see here is I've set the Pacific time zone. And if you want, you can go to this link that I provide on Wikipedia that will show you what you can use for your time zone as well. So you can copy and paste that if you'd like. Just make sure you keep those no spaces between the equal sign and things like that, and you're good. Now you'll notice what it's doing here is it's doing a space with the backslash. So it's another command that we're running, which is basically saying, don't do that interactive question thing where you're asking me what the time zone is. Okay. I'm going to go on to the next lines of code. And as you'll recall, one of the things I talked about in a previous video was that we have packages, package managers. And one of the package managers that comes with the Ubuntu operating system is apt. And you'll see sometimes apt or apt-get. Now, what we want to do is make sure we update the apt database so that it has knowledge of the latest versions of software available on the internet. So we're just going to run a command called apt update, and that's our layer. We're creating a layer here in Docker. And next, what we're going to do is type a number of commands. And so I'm going to paste this code in and scroll up a little bit. Okay, what we're doing now is installing Python. To do that, we first need to install some software called the Software Properties Common. And you'll notice that -y in the front. Once again, if I tried to install this manually, it would start to install and then it would stop and say, are you sure you want to install this? Yes or no. And again, Docker will not build an image if there's a question being asked. So what we do is we say -y for yes, and then we'll install that software and we won't be prompted for do you want to install yes or no? It'll just automatically install it. You'll also notice these two ampersands with the backslash. There are times when you'll use those when you're running new commands, or there's times when you'll use just a backslash. There's a lot of information on how and why you use those online. I'm not going to get into great details here. The next line is going to be something that might look a little weird to you, and this is where you'll see this dead snakes thing. And you might be thinking, Bill, what is this dead snakes thing? What hacker group are you having me use? Well, it turns out that Python, as you know, is a programming language, but it's also the name of a snake. And a lot of groups like to use funny snake names to name their products. In this case, it's Dead Snakes. This is not a hacker group. What this is a group that spends a lot of time and effort to make sure the latest version of Python is available to what's called Debian variants of Linux. And Ubuntu, the operating system that we're using, is one of those. So Dead Snakes is just a really helpful group of people that provide access to versions of Python for Ubuntu, basically. I provide a YouTube video so you can watch and see who these people are and what they do if you're interested. But we have to set up this personal package archive, and that's what Dead Snakes is. The next line is actually going to install Python, and you can see there's our variable that we use, that argument, pyver. Anytime you want to use your variable, you put a little $ in front of it, and then you type the name of the argument. And it has to be exactly the way you typed it, so capital PYVER, and of course, again, no spaces involved here. Finally, we're going to install pip, which is Python's package manager. For this next code, I'm going to minimize the Explorer here. I'm just getting rid of that so that you can see the screen. I'm going to paste this code in so you can see both lines. Okay, so what we're doing is setting the default version of Python. Why does this matter? Well, it turns out just up here on line 19 for me, it says to install Software Properties Common. These are prerequisites in order to install Python. However, it also installs an old version of Python. So then we come down here and we say, oh, install our Python 3.11.x. Now we're going to have two versions of Python installed in Ubuntu. So what these two lines of code down here are going to do is say, make version 3.11.x the default version. And you can see that we're using our argument variable, again, that pyver, in both of those lines. Finally, we want to make sure we update all of our package managers that we've been using and make sure they are up to date before we move on. So I'm going to scroll up once again a little bit here, and we're going to update our apt-get, and we're also going to update pip. And we'll do that. We'll create a few new lines there. We're not going to add our AI and machine learning software yet. What we want to do is just make sure that Python is installed properly. So I'm going to save my Docker file. That's Command S or Control S. I'm going to close the Docker file, and then I'm going to open Explorer back up again. And now I'm going to rebuild our Docker container. Remember, what we just edited here was a Docker file. We added some lines, but our Docker container or Docker image is not updating automatically. We need to officially tell Docker to rebuild the container now. So I'm going to type my Command or Control-Shift-P on my keyboard and type rebuild container and press return. Now, mine is going to happen very quickly. You might want to pause your screen if it takes a while. You can see that mine's already rebuilt. And all I want to do now is test that this did install properly. So I'm going to type Control backtick on my keyboard and make sure that I am in the running container. I know that because I can see this blue bar down in the bottom. And I can also see the root when I'm in the terminal window. And now what I'm going to do is type the word Python 3, the number 3, space, dash, V, that's capital V, and press return. What I'm expecting to see here is version 3.11 dot something. In my case, I have 3.11.5. You might have a newer version, but make sure it does at least say 3.11 dot something. What I'm going to do is just click the little trash can to close down the terminal window. And I'm going to do my Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P and close the remote connection. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more like this, please like, comment, and click the bell to support my channel.